I grew up in Berkeley, and I wasn't even allowed to go into my neighbor's house. My mom was old school strict. But if I wanted to go up to Cal to watch a football game, I could go up there by myself. So, now would be like a couple mile walk uphill. But she's like, if it was with the college, you could go up there. But we didn't hang out in people's houses, that type of thing, it was a great place to grow up. The Bay Area itself is just a beautiful melting pot of people from around the world, and then locally, with the Latino, the Black, white, Asian. I've always been proud to be an American, but I don't buy that. I don't buy the African American, Latino American. We're Americans.
Hey, welcome to KROSS BARZ, the podcast where we discuss interesting topics with alternative perspective. I'm your host, Big O. Have with me
Tanae, back in the building one more time with our guest, Mr. Dennis Gaxiola, comedian extraordinaire. Give it up for Mr. Gaxiola. Woo, woo, woo.
It's good to be here.
This is Dennis, Big
yes,
Dennis,
sir.
Mr. Gaxiola. It's great, and thank you for coming. All right, we've been
thank
on hiatus
because
Big O was sick a few weeks ago, and I was fighting the vid, and I'm starting like, is this the first one of the year? But this is not, is it?
Right.
No, I think it is the first one of the year. So we have one. Okay, so before the vid, and now this is like post. So right now I'm Jordan. We're in the 4-5. I'm trying to get back in the mix and everything. But at the same time, sir, comedy extraordinaire. So first and foremost, all right, tell me, where are you originally from?
I grew up in Berkeley, California, right next to Oakland, and I'm from the Bay.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Sound like
you from Berkeley. The Bay.
Sound like you have money. Like this is
nah.
Berkeley, California, like the college, like University of Cal Berkeley.
Yeah, I grew up down the street from Cal Berkeley, but I grew up in the flats. I didn't grow up in the hills. I grew up with the real folks.
Gotcha.
So
okay,
the real folks.
Yeah. All right.
Berkeley's a melting pot.
Okay.
Berkeley's a melting pot. It's definitely, you got the higher education folks, but you also got everyday people. And Berkeley runs right into Oakland, so it has that same feel.
All right, so you said the flats and the hills, so that's kind of how you differentiate the flats, like the east west. You got the flats and the hills. Okay.
Well, you got like West Berkeley. West Berkeley is more of more of the hood. North Berkeley is kind of mellow, and then South Berkeley, that's borders Oakland. So that from one block to another, you don't know. You're right there. So but up in the hills, that's where the money is.
Okay, all right.
I'm not from there.
Berkeley, I was like, oh, okay. I was like, whoa. Like, okay, this is a little different. It's like somebody talking about, South Beverly Hills is where the hood at. Like, really? Like Berkeley, that is super awesome. So now, okay, you're born. This is where you come up. You have a big melting pot. All right, what is your heritage? Your because you just said you were.
Yeah, I was raised saying Mexican and Puerto Rican, but with that DNA coming out now, that DNA should stand for do not ask, because I'm finding out stuff. So, it's cool to know, I found out I got a lot more Portuguese than I ever thought of, but
wow.
Yeah, but I grew up Latino, man, in the holidays. Okay. My immediate family, there's 2 boys and 2 girls, my brother and 2 sisters. I got a Black brother-in-law, a Jewish brother-in-law, Puerto Rican sister-in-law, and my wife is Puerto Rican from Hawaii. We got this melting pot. 3 of my kids are Filipino, so we got a little bit of everything.
You said 3 of your kids are Filipino.
Conversation.
Okay. Listen, Thanksgiving must be awesome at the crib. All right. So
Thanksgiving, we do an emphasis on the Puerto Rican food. So traditional Thanksgiving, with a little more emphasis towards on the Latino side, the Puerto Rican food. Christmas, we lean towards the Mexican heritage. But I remember when my brother-in-law's mom was alive, she would come over with cornbread and greens. You ain't gonna forget about us, and we would have, from from cornbread and greens to red beans and rice with some lumpia from the Filipino side. So it's
Oh yes.
it's a beautiful melting pot, bro. And I got one son that's his mom was black and Blackfoot, Native American. So
Wow.
his son, the mom is Italian and Japanese. So this little curly-haired, blue-eyed little boy is the United Nations. He's got a little bit of everything in him. That's my grandson. Yeah.
Hey, that's diversity.
So no one's gonna whisper
all in one. I love
exactly.
Absolutely.
I love it.
So no one's gonna whisper something behind you without somebody in your family like, oh yeah, we know what he said. Whatever language. You're like, oh no, we got that. Absolutely.
I remember
now growing up in. Oh, excuse me. Go ahead.
I was gonna say when I was in the Air Force, I remember I made a sweet potato pie, and my two coworkers happened to be African American. They said, "Who made this pie?" I said, "I did." And they went, "No, who taught you?" I said, "My mom." They said, "Oh, your mom was black. This is Southern style." I was like, "No,
I said, "No, cook."
So my mom could cook. My mom cooked all kinds of food. So that's the beauty of a multicultural family. You get a little bit of everything.
I love it.
Absolutely.
I love it.
And that's super awesome. So now you got multicultural family as well in an area where, where I think this is my own perspective of Berkeley, California, where you have a lot of people who are community or nation oriented. So when people are forward thinking, I think of Berkeley. Like that's one of the colleges where they're kind of forward thinking, where, universal healthcare, that's some of the talking point, free college. That was, coming out of Berkeley. That was some of the things where I've read about. And I'm like, came from there. And then the melting pot, man, it sounds like a real cool place to live. And then, you know what to say because you could get punched in the face in South Berkeley because it's right next to Oakland. So it's like, watch your mouth because you can still get punched in the mouth.
Yeah, growing up, my friends were literally the United Nations. And then when I joined the Air Force, I just happened to connect with most of the brothers on base, and those were my friends. They're the ones that they tease me. I owe them my comedy career. We would hang out. Back then, you could get away with capping on each other, and they were like Mexican this, and I'd be black that, and then it was just good fun. We knew how to laugh with each other,
Right.
So I did when I started comedy. I was on only quote unquote black comedy show I didn't do was Def Jam, and that was by choice. I was my dad was a minister, and I didn't want to do Def Jam, be on the show where my dad would be like, "What are you doing?" So, but Comic View 9 times, Jamie Foxx's special, Martin Lawrence's special on Stars.
BT Comic View, I seen on that you did too.
Yes, I did that 9 episodes. The Apollo, I survived the Apollo.
Me too.
Okay. Me too. What year? Were the 80s or 90s?
90s. 90. Steve was hosting, so it's like 98, 99 time frame, right in there. And
okay, that's late. Okay.
Yeah.
Sinbad was going because I was like, the early 90s, that was kind of rough. Like 80s, I think they were still on amateur, like they amateur night was different. Like they would throw things still in the 80s. 90s, they started taming it down a little bit.
When they introduced me, they realized that I was going to go after Maze, and they're like, you can't have the comedian after that. So they flipped it at the last second, and they didn't take away the tree trunk. So the tree trunk is sitting there as they introduced me. So, there's times in life where you got a split-second decision. Yeah. Do I rub the tree trunk and make them think I'm part of amateur hour, or do I ignore it and risk getting booed off the stage for not rubbing the tree trunk? So I rubbed the tree trunk. But it was a cool experience, man.
Man, that's awesome. So we're going to get there. So now your multicultural upbringing, getting there, and now how is school for you going? Because now I'm thinking close to Oakland, but you're still in Berkeley. Did you encounter gangs? And then it's like, okay, how would you deal with it in middle and high school?
What was funny was the Latino gangs started messing with me because I didn't hang out with them. I had black friends, white friends, Asian friends. then I realized that the head of that gang was my cousin. So I was like, hey, Larry, you tell your boys to leave me alone. And that side of the family always knew that, you know, our side of the family, we were the church folks. And they knew we didn't run with the gangs. Yeah, so all of a sudden I'd walk down the hallway and the Mexican cholos would like park the Red Sea. They would like, that's Larry's cousin. They stopped throwing elbows at me and messing with me.
Day.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, Berkeley was a cool school, 3,000 students of every walk of life. Berkeley only had one high school. So you had the rich, the poor, the middle class, white, black, Asian, Latino, Indian. I grew up with people like that, you know, so multiculturalism is how I was raised, you know.
That's pretty awesome. Like on the East Coast, I think of Queens like that. They said 1 year, I believe I was doing some research and they said that Corona Queens was the most diverse community in the United States.
Nice.
And they said followed by the Bay Area. So they kind of said Bay Area versus one particular place over there.
That's
so I didn't realize that, because in my mindset at that time, this was like in the early 90s when I looked this up. It could have since changed since now. I'm telling about the early 90s when I've seen this report. And I always thought of Oakland just being Black, but when they said they have a large Asian population out there, I was like, man, that's, you know, it kind of messes with your century, because what you see and what's put out there is kind of different from the reality, and that's pretty cool as well. So now
Oakland,
you're in high school.
Unfortunately, Oakland is a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the poorer folks, Black, Latinos, white, and Asian, they are so underserved. I went through a divorce. I moved in with my mom and dad. I'm still in the Air Force, but and I had my boys, my 2 sons, and my mom and dad lived in East Oakland. The school that my kids were assigned to, they didn't come with torn pages or written on pages. Chunks of pages, like from the history book, were torn out. So when we complained, and they were, oh, you're federal, because I was in the Air Force. You could pick any school in the district. Well, of course, I took my sons up to the hills, to the foothills that had beautiful schools, same school district. And up there, you would see predominantly white, but Latino, Black, Asian that were wealthy. Their kids were getting new computers, new textbooks, same school district. And I went, oh, so Oakland knows what it's doing. And it's sad because there's kids in East Oakland that have never even crossed the bridge to see what San Francisco looks like. You know, they grow up in a really, really sheltered area, and you know, it just fosters a repetitive life, a cycle of poverty, undereducated. You know, I remember talking to Marshawn Lynch's mom, and she went to school with him because she knew her son was special and he was dyslexic. She sat in his classes that he struggled to make sure he got the grade point average to go to Cal Berkeley. You know, so she knew she had a special boy with physically, you know, he was dominant in football. But without the grades, he wasn't going to go to college.
Yeah. And for me, that was one of the points where when they portrayed him as ignorant, and I was like, he went to Cal. I said, you know, and watch this. Another player that was with him, right? Now I'm going to show you how people are portrayed. Marshawn Lynch went to Cal Berkeley, as well as Deshaun Jackson. Yep, that was one of the best. And I believe they went 10-1. The only team that they lost to that year in the Pac-10 was USC, which they were stacked for those years. That's when they had a dynasty rolling. However, and Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback, by the way. But when you see Deshaun Jackson as this, you know, now he has hair braided, he has a bunch of tattoos, and they portray him as being uneducated. I was like, you know, the boy went to Cal Berkeley, Marshawn Lynch, and then Aaron Rodgers, they don't see him as like a thug or anything, but yet still he only went there for 2 years because he went to JUCO. But the other ones that was there for like 3 or 4 years. Yeah.
Aaron didn't qualify to go to Cal. Marshawn and
I didn't want to say that.
Yeah.
Look, I didn't want to say that.
Marshawn and Deshaun qualified. I mean, I grew up in Berkeley and I wasn't even allowed to go into my neighbor's house. My mom was old school strict. But if I wanted to go up to Cal to watch a football game, I could go up there by myself. So you know, now would be like a couple mile walk uphill, but she's like, if it was with the college, you could go up there. but we didn't hang out in people's houses, you know, that type of thing, you know. So yeah, it was a great place to grow up. The Bay Area itself is just a beautiful melting pot of people from around the world, and then locally, you know, with the Latino, the Black, white, Asian. You know somebody from Oakland. If somebody's from Oakland, that old saying, hella cool, that comes from the Bay. They say California, no, that's a Bay saying.
Okay. Now hold up. Let me say this right now because there's a slight delay. So if you see me speaking and I stop because it just picked up.
Okay.
So there's I can tell that we're just off, and I don't know if it's my internet or Jay to the Nate's internet. So if you see that happening, just good. All right. So now, high school. Why did you go to the Air Force versus college? What was that deciding factor? What happened?
I've always been proud to be an American, but I don't buy that. I don't buy the African American, Latino American. We're Americans. And I grew up with the patriotic feeling. And my uncle was in the Air Force, and I got to go to the base with him one or two times, and I fell in love with it. So it was always on the back burner. I didn't join until I was 21 because it was always, man, I should have joined. And one day I went by the recruiter and went, and I was at the JC on a program to transfer to Cal, to go to Cal Berkeley. But I just saw the writing on the wall, the finances. And I was like, you know what? Time for me to do 4 years. And 4 years led to 20 years. So
wow.
20 years. So you did 20 years of Birdman. All right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Shout out to all the enlisted men,
Yes.
So now, what was your experience there in the Air Force? And did you fight in any of the battles or wars? Or was it, deployment in just different places?
I was in Desert Storm, the last rotation of Desert Storm before it transitioned to the other fighting, to the other campaigns. My order said Desert Storm, and I remember being out there getting shot
91?
at.
Oh man.
Yeah, 91.
91 Desert Storm. Okay, that's the first one. Okay.
All
right.
And I remember being in a building, and Air Force, we don't have weapons. The Army was guarding our little base. And Air Force guys are running to the window, looking out, what's going on? And the Air Force and the Army is like, get off the balcony,
And y'all like, we want to see.
Yeah, I was on the 5th floor. And since I was a sergeant, I had like one of the nicer rooms. I just laid there and prayed. I was like, if they hit this building with like mortars or something, we're dead. I don't have a weapon to fight back. So I just laid there. You think you're about to die and you don't take time to pray. So I was like, if it's my time, Lord, I'm sorry.
Everything. You know what I mean? Everything. I'm sorry for everything.
I was confessing on stuff I didn't even do. I'm sorry about Jimmy Hoffa. Who killed him?
All right.
Hey, so, are any of your sons interested, or would you have any of them interested in going to the military, or have any of them talked about that anyway?
Only my oldest son, and he did some time with the reserves. He just finished up this last year. He did his time and he enjoyed it. But my daughter, she was in ROTC, and I thought she might end up going to the Air Force Academy, but she was like, nah, I just did that for my resume. I want my resume to look good. So she did what she needed to do to get her scholarship, because you can have a 4.0, but if you don't have that resume from high school, no school's going to accept it.
Absolutely, well-rounded. And that's pretty awesome that your children is thinking that, and as well as you, because you actually went to junior college and said, I'm going to go this route, and you made a conscious decision. Whereas sometimes, people just look at it and say, he's Mexican, and he has Puerto Rican family, and they're just gonna work as a auto mechanic or a detail or something.
That happens culturally. If we don't come from education, one of my friends was saying when he told his dad he wanted to go to school, his dad said that's not what we do. And his dad was raised working the fields, working out and and dealing with the migrant workers, and that's what. So his mind was you work and support your family, and he told his son, "Why are you going to waste your time in school? This is who we are." So he had to break that, that generational ignorance,
That's tough. That's
Yeah.
real tough. Whereas, you know, I understand both sides now that I've gotten much older. Before it was like college, but I understand the value of vocational work, you know, and what I mean by that is people that's welders,
Yep.
construction workers,
Need it all.
you know, electricians, plumbers. You know, I had to tell a couple of students before, you know, that plumbers make more than teachers. You know, so like, don't get it twisted. You know,
Right.
so don't get it twisted. You know, there's a lot of plumbers who make six figures. So
Yeah, my second
All
youngest
back-
son, I knew my second youngest son was not for college. He struggled through high school, focusing.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, that boy graduated high school, got a job with an alarm company installing. And he's only been with them 6 months, and he's employee of the year. He found his
the numbers
niche.
don't make it. So 6 months, but he made it employee for a year.
The kid, he led their company in sales. So he walked into the house to install an alarm for one door, and he would end up selling the whole package. He found his niche. So I was like, okay, as long as you find something that you have passion about, now get a little bit of paper behind you, you know, a little bit of, like, even if it's an associate's in electrical wiring, that's what he's doing.
Right, some type of something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Certification or something.
Yeah,
But that's
exactly.
funny because now when you look at it, you know, he's like, nah, you're gonna need the extra one because people like me, we can get through this. You know, what you think I should get? I'm gonna give you a package. So
Yeah.
you can get. And I'm gonna get you this. Yeah, I couldn't get through this. Like he sells every time coming through. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
now you're in the Air Force, Desert Storm, they dropping bombs. You talking about I want to go home. Everybody, get up out of here. You know, I want to meet some ladies. And
Bro.
now
The bombs were the least scariest thing, man. By the time I left there, the viper snakes and the scorpions and the wolf spiders.
What?
The wolf spiders are like that big, and they bite you. You don't feel it.
What the hell is a wolf spider? They like on
Not a wolf spider, a camel spider. Camel spider. The camel spider, it can get like that big, and its bite is like Novocaine. So if you're sleeping and it bites you, you don't feel it. And then it eats. They're a flesh-eating spider. So when that stuff was coming out, I was like, sweet baby Jesus, I'm ready to go back home. This ain't for me.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, I had to just look it up. It says the spider, they're not deadly, but they are vicious predators. Their bite can be painful, but they do eat. That is insane. I never heard of that. They're humongous. I wish I could show it on the screen.
No, don't. We good.
So at least a bomb would end. You get hit by a camel spider, you're gonna sit there. Look at my arm, half my arm. That dude ate my arm. Yeah,
Oh, no.
they had
That's
Marines.
arachnophobia for real.
Yeah, they had guys that were out in the actual combat. You know, when they sleep at night, a couple of them woke up and parts of their face were eaten off. So, yeah, that part of the world, that's a different. You know, I'm glad I experienced it, seeing parts of Saudi Arabia that I never thought I would see, but nothing like America. As jacked up as we are, there's nothing like America.
Say that again. Bars on that one.
So bars. So of the countries that you visited, which one would you say, you know, you enjoyed the best, and which one would you say you know you didn't like, you know, at all? Maybe your experience wasn't great there.
Japan is beautiful. I love going to Japan.
Okay.
Korea was rough.
Were you in North or South?
South Korea.
Okay.
Yeah, if I was in North Korea, they don't let you out. So I'd still be there.
Okay.
Korea, when I was there in 2000, I mean, I opened for Jeffrey Osborne for Y2K for New Year's Eve 2000.
Oh, shit. Can you woo?
Exactly.
Woo. To be
One of my good friends who got me on Comic View, I had 2 tickets to that show, so I gave them to him. I was like, Rick, I want to bless you and your wife, because, you know, he always looked out for me. Well, when Jeffrey went through the audience, who's he pick out? My boy Rick. And Rick brought the house down with the woo-woo. All these years later, I call him Ricky Woo-Woo Sullivan. All these years later.
Woo Sullivan, absolutely.
Ricky Woo Woo.
Yeah. He became a deacon at his church, and the church folks called him Woo Woo because of my nickname for him.
Pastor Woo, no, Deacon Woo Woo.
Yeah,
okay,
but
that might mean.
Yeah, I left that. I did a Pro Bowl event in Hawaii, and from Hawaii, I went to Korea in 2000. And that was the roughest year of my life. I mean, Jamie Foxx's people had talked to me about doing the last season of the Jamie Foxx show. And Air Force was like, nah, you owe us some time in overseas. So they sent me to Korea for a year. Korea and Japan are night and day. You know, Korea is the hood of Asia, and Japan is Beverly Hills of Asia.
Oh wow! Wait a minute. So okay, I was thinking maybe like Vietnam or Laos, some of those countries like not known. Korea is one of the more prominent ones, you know, of the countries in Asia. Like Mongolia, like who's in Mongolia? That would be the projects I was.
Exactly. The Korea, when I was there, and they've come a long ways in the last 20-something years, but when I was there, you would still see people working the rice fields by hand. And
in the little marshes.
The little marshes, they'd be out there.
Yeah.
My little landlord, her spine was like a question mark. It was so curved. But when I would leave, she was working her little field. And when I would come home from work, she'd be coming in from the field. She would do that all day long, bent over, working her field. And there's no welfare out there, so you either work or you don't eat. And so it different experience. I'm glad I saw it. But yeah, you know, between Saudi Arabia, that was scary. I mean, I was out there during the wartime.
Okay, yeah. That was built up. Like it's built up.
That's where all the support was, and I knew they didn't like us. They did not like Americans there, you know. So when we'd go downtown, I would make the young troops get under the car to look, like check under the car before we get. Like, what are you worried about? I was like, they don't like us. Why are we here? You know,
it's like they're allies. You'd be like, nah, they not allies. I got you.
They're allies. They're not allies. They're allies.
Absolutely. So while you were in the Air Force, what was your job? Because you did 20 years. So what was your particular occupation while in the Air Force?
I was a supply guy, warehouse specialist that did that for 1 year out of my 20. All the other duty assignments were special duty assignments. It hurt me promotion wise, but man, there was one job where I went to work like this while active duty because they didn't want us in uniform. So I had an unusual, easy 20 years in the Air Force. You know,
I have two friends there actually in the Air Force. One, you know, and I'm like, yeah, they usually say the Air Force is where the smart people go of the military.
You got to have the higher, the score's got to be a little higher.
Yeah, the Air Force. Look, if you're not that bright, they be like, yeah, you might want to be a Marine. Like, whoa, my dad was an Army guy, so that's why like he actually discouraged it when I was like I'm going to the Marine, I'm gonna be a Navy SEAL. He was like, man, take your dumb ass to college. You know, like, take your dumb ass to college. You don't want to be out there shooting people shooting at you. No. And I was like, yeah, you got a point.
Especially Marine and Army, they really gotta change. They gotta rebuild your mind. They gotta make it so that when they order you to go in that line of fire, that you don't question it, you do it.
Correct.
Air Force, Army's goal is to get everybody with at least a GED. Air Force's goal is to get everybody with an associate's degree.
Yeah, I think Army went up because
so Army you might have to have, but that's back when I joined. That was the difference where Air Force was really focused on education. Air Force had the slowest promotion rate because if people don't move, you can't move into their slot but they had the highest retention rate. You know, Marines, 2 years in, you could be sergeant because everyone else is either dead or gone.
Facts. So yeah, that's you know, that's.
And what was a trip during this time? I was doing my comedy.
So you were doing comedy
while you were in the military?
On a dare from the early 90s in a class, a leadership class. One of my friends from Baltimore, from Washington, he was in my class and he had won the Base Talent Show for comedy. So we sat next to each other for the whole month of this leadership class and I clowned him every day. And the third guy was like, you should do comedy. And then this young man named Michael Sykes, who was from the Washington area, comedian from Washington, he introduced me to comedy. And when he passed away 2 years ago now, I cried like my own brother died because of the impact he had on my life. He literally changed the trajectory of my life by introducing me to comedy.
So you didn't pick
so
up comedy until you got to the military?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I'm thinking like you were growing up and you had something. Anything growing up led you there? It was just military, and it just happened that way.
It literally is like something you see out of a movie. Somebody dared me to go on stage, and another guy was like, "I'll show you how to do it." And one thing led to another, and it took over my. When you get comedy in your blood, you process everything. Can I use that on stage? You know, so yeah, it got in my it's part of my DNA now.
Yeah, I'm sure too, like the multicultural background, that helped for it to be a little bit easier for you to, come into different jokes and things like that.
Yeah, I could, but climate has changed so much now. The climate where everybody is so hypersensitive. Material I did on Comic View that got applause breaks 20 years ago would have people saying something different today, and it's sad that we've got so sensitive that we can't even, because not laugh at each other, laugh with each other. Right. I was in Minnesota last week, and they're like, please stay away from anything with race. We've been through a lot out here. And it was at a church, and I was like, I'm gonna do me, and don't worry about it. And,
amen.
And they enjoyed it. They're like, wow, you know how to go to the line. But that's what I learned, coming like Latino, you're right in the middle, so it's comedy is nothing but sociology with the punchline, man, because you got to understand sociology.
Ooh, bars. I like that. That's great. Yeah. And you said this one thing on I'm sorry, I have to say this. You said this one thing when you were on your dry bar comedy. And you said this one long piece, and I had to write it down because it was so good. And I want to ask you where you got it from. You said that politically correct comedy, because you led me into this, it said is for a non-smoking, drug-free, vegetarian, bisexual, handicapped, Native American senior citizen female that drives her electric car to her job at the recycling plant. How? Like where do you come up with that? I kept rewinding it. I thought that was hilarious. How do you think of something like that?
Just, being the man in the middle, and seeing all the things, being able to go, I could do things that white comics can't do. I could do things that black comics can't do. So I always felt like I was the man in the middle. And what's funny is in the Latino culture, they look at me, literally the first time I did a Latino showcase in Hollywood, some of the comics, not the producers, not the club, some of the comics were like, here's the black Mexican. That's what they called me. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
I can feel that because it makes you feel good. Like your comedy is comfortable to me. When I watch your comedy, I'll crack up laughing, even though a lot of your jokes may be from the Latino perspective or how you were raised. It's funny to me. Like I still get it. You know what I mean? There's a commonality.
We're not that different.
We're
the
not.
Commonality.
There's
exactly.
The familiarity, the spirit is there. You know what I mean? So you get it because the Caucasian people in the audience were laughing. I'm cracking up. This is really funny. And as I did more research with all of the, like you said, I was looking up different comics, and they were saying American comedians. And I knew you were from a different, but it doesn't say Mexican. It doesn't say, it might say, but it said American comedian. When you said that a little earlier, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like I'm born here, I'm American.
I don't let them get away with that. They cannot put a label on me, and nobody should allow them, because that marginalizes us when they put that label. You're African American.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I met a white pastor from South Africa, and he had become a U.S. citizen. He was hilarious. He goes, I'm actually African American, because he was from South Africa. And he was raised there. He was a white cat. But when they see, and he was not marginalized. They marginalize us with labels, and that we cannot allow them to do that.
Absolutely.
Nicole Kidman. I remember people saying that in the early 90s because she's from South Africa.
Yeah.
And people were like, you know, because at first I thought she was from Australia, but it was like, no, she's from South Africa. And it was like, yeah, because now if she marries an American man, she would literally technically be eligible for financial aid because she's an African American.
Wow.
I didn't get it. You know, like I don't get it. And then I had to understand, like, that's what labels will do, you know, to you. And I was like, Nicole, and I was like, okay, she's from Africa. And then she marries on, she's American. Oh, yeah, I get it now. And what you just said, in Cicely Tyson autobiography, you know, just read it, right? Awesome book. And she actually said that about Sounder. And she was in her book, she was saying that they labeled it as a Black movie, so it kind of marginalized it. So it tried to tell, it was basically a dog whistle for everyone else. Don't go see the movie. Only Black people should go see this movie. So now you can't get those sales numbers. So they don't say, okay, you know, Telly Savalas is in this movie, you know, so only white people. They say, no, it's a great movie. Yeah. You know, and I was like, wow, you know, and so when you just said that, that's what resonated with me. It was like, you're absolutely right. And other people said that as well. And I've heard it so often in music, you know, where somebody said, I'm not a rapper, I'm a musician. And I was like, huh? And now I'm seeing the blend of so many, you know, stuff. So that's why I was like, yeah, Drake before Drake was Lauryn Hill, you know, for me, that was my generation. So I know it was people before that. But let's move on into you in comedy during the military, and now you're trying to take this full time. You're saying this is going to be your avenue, or are you still hesitant? Like, look, this is me picking up a few dollars on the weekend.
Excuse me. When I got out the service, of course, I had cold feet. Like, how am I going to support my family? Yeah. But I took a job at a warehouse as a warehouse manager for 3 months. And I was like, yeah, this ain't for me.
You had to watch boxes for a living, huh? Yeah.
NIL, excuse me.
Yeah, me, Roadway Express, yeah, absolutely. Picking up boxes. Oh, Papa, you got a sponsor?
Oh, woo!
I've been wanting Latino no more. No, you Black now.
I've been wanting
Taco Bell.
I've been wanting some Popeyes for like 2 weeks, and we came home from church. And I told my wife, "Are you good? We're going to Popeyes," because my wife's always eating healthy, but I wanted some chicken. I wanted, you know, some red beans and rice. And woo!
I gotta ask you a question.
That's hilarious.
We gotta see how you like the Blackness / Latino meter. All right, what time you go into church and what time you get out?
Oh, so I go to a huge multicultural church.
What time you get out?
It's an hour and a half service.
Oh, okay, that's more.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Because they have the second service.
That's what I say, no. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Because the church I grew up in, you know, Sunday school got out when the Lord was done. And then there was an evening service, and my grandfather was the pastor. So, you know,
you had to say, clean up, pick up the tissues.
Oh yeah. So you didn't miss church growing up. You know, if my dad was sick, my mom was sick, my grandpa would pick us up. We were at church. We were raised in the church and long services. But I can't do church of one color anymore. I was raised in a Latino church. My church is multicultural. And it's, you know, from the pastoral staff to the worship team to the congregation, white, Black, Asian, Latino, and if you're not, I get to speak there from time to time. And I told the church one day, so you're not comfortable in this setting, don't worry about heaven. There's
no Black or white heaven, it's just heaven.
It's heaven, you know, we're all his children. Can you imagine if, you know, telling somebody, you're throwing a party, but you tell somebody, it's my son's birthday party, but you can't come because of the color of your skin. The Heavenly Father looks at it the same way, and he's like, I'm throwing a party for eternity, and you're not comfortable around all my kids.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
You ain't gonna be there. Absolutely. You know, there's no segregation in heaven. You know.
Yeah. You know, some people are gonna be up there surprised. Be like, oh man, you ain't make it. But then again, it's old way of thinking and not being able to make the adjustment, you know.
I refer to hardcore racists as logs. like a fire log, because that's what they're gonna be for eternity. There's gonna be a log in hell. You're gonna keep the fire going.
Oh, boy, that's
Yeah,
good.
man.
Yeah, like, yeah, man, put another log
Go
on the
ahead,
fire.
put it on
There you
us.
go.
Keep it going.
Keep it going. Keep it going.
That's great.
So now
That's
you
great.
said 3 months in, you got tired of telling, hey, that don't go there. Like you say, okay, listen, if you don't know that going aisle 5, okay, I can't do it. So you
Well,
actually
the
took
people. I love working with the people, but it was
yeah.
the management, and I was part of the management team. But I quit on them once, and they called me back, and they're like, "Hey, we'll give you a $3,000 raise to come back." So I went back for about another month and a half. And I was like, "Man, I got an offer to go on tour, so I'm done," and that was it.
Oh man! So your first tour, who was that?
It was the Latin Kings of Comedy tour. So
Wow.
What? So your first?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yo,
Wow.
Look. That sounded like a what was it? Who was it? Ken Griffey Jr. type thing. Yeah, I never had a real job. You know, I left high school and I played for the Mariners. Like, okay. Okay.
So he goes out with, I think that was Joey Medina, and that was what was it? Sanchez.
Johnny Sanchez, yeah, Joey Medina, Paul. So I was on tour with Paul for 2 years before we realized we're cousins.
Okay, come on.
Your
You get the
cousin
listen, you feed into the stereotype. You feed into the stereotype.
Wow.
It was such a beaner moment because we're talking about the same cousin. And he always gets on me and how I say Gaxiola. I say it, with the Anglo slant. We just pronounce all the letters. In Spanish, there's no X.
Yeah, correct.
So it's
Right.
Gaxiola. But I'm a little more on the store-bought salsa side.
You on the Taco Bell side. Okay, got
Yeah, and he was like, "Hey, my mom is a Gaxiola. Stop saying it like that." So in conversation, we talked about a mutual cousin that had been killed on Christmas Day by a drunk driver. And I was like, "Yeah, man, in this town, Ridley." And he goes, "That's my cousin." I'm like, "It's my cousin." So we realized we're probably like way removed, but we call each other primo, so
okay. Primo.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. That's what's up. And it's pretty awesome. I thought you were gonna say Larry, the one ahead of the gang. I was about to say, hold on now. Okay, Larry got both of y'all. But I was like, all right.
L for Larry.
Yeah, like
Larry made high school a little easier. So when he comes to my shows, Larry will come to my shows, and I'm like, "Yeah, man, I made it through high school because of the L." People throwing up other signs. I'm throwing up L. I'm with Larry.
Larry, get that. Larry should be running security for you. Get Larry a job. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
I would hire him, but he's shorter than me. He's like 5'6". I'm like, "Man,
that's the most dangerous one. Oh, that's the most dangerous one. Definitely the most dangerous. Absolutely.
Shout out to all the shorties in the world.
See, today I got a little bit of hair sticking up, so I'm 5'7.5". That's a half-inch extra right there.
Yes, that counts.
Exactly.
So now, okay, you on Latin Kings Comedy Tour, excuse me, the Latin Kings of Comedy Tour, excuse me, and you're getting to see the world, okay?
Yep.
So now, what city did you felt like, oh my God, I get the love, and I'm always going to come back to this city outside of your home, Oakland? Because I know Oakland, Berkeley, I would assume that's it. But outside of that, which one city you said, you know what, I like this? They gave me a lot of love here.
The Dallas region, El Paso, all the Texas cities, they are except for there was one that was right on the border, and those were like Mexicans. And
you ain't doing that. You ain't gonna get skip clean over that. You just said Mexican twice, like it was like Mexican, like the Mexicans ain't Mexican.
These were cowboy hats, belt buckles, the whole 9 yards, and I'm like,
cartel. I say cartel Mexican. Yeah. Like they have like chopped bodies in a freezer in a that's what I call cartel. I'm wrong.
I went out to the lobby. I always, because nobody knows me, so I could go through an audience and nobody even knows I'm about to go on stage. I'm walking through the lobby going, ain't nobody speaking English. So we went backstage. The 4 guys on tour, one spoke Spanish, and that was Paul. The rest of us were just, California boys. And like, oh, bro, they ain't speaking English. And the guys that were in charge of the tour, they were the ones that did the Kings of Comedy tour, the Latham, Stan Latham's company. The guy that was our tour director was in stitches, man. He was like, "Oh, because Paul went out and performed in Spanish, and then introduced me."
It's gonna be a change. And now we got
that was a rough show. So that other than that, but Dallas, Houston, Off the Hook, El Paso, San Antonio, the Texas cities, they show a lot of love to the Latino comics. California's cool, but we got so much going on out here, Like for Cinco de Mayo, I'll never promote a show on Cinco de Mayo again. Take every activity from Black History Month and do it in one day. You can't.
We got a poetry show. We got a spoken word show. Yeah, we got a cancer, friendly, and amazed. Okay, we got a rap battle. Step show. We got a rap battle and a battle of the bands. Like all one.
Yeah, try to do all that in one day. That's what Cinco de Mayo ends up being like. And I promoted one show when I first started out on Cinco de Mayo, and I was like, I'll never do this again. Yeah,
it's funny. I think I have since been taken down. I kind of went semi-viral with my Cinco de Mayo song on Facebook. That's why I said it's similar, because Instagram wasn't really out. I was like, oh, okay. I had a nice little moment there with my coworkers, but it was
nice.
But way back in the day. So now going around the cities, Latin Kings of Comedy, you're gaining national recognition. So now, where do you go? Like, do you get an agent? You had an agent already? Or did you say, all right, I'm going to just book this myself because I know you get a check, but now, comedy is, you eat what you kill. So it could be feast or famine. So how do you navigate that?
My manager was Jamie Foxx's road manager. So he's been my manager I've been doing comedy for 28 years. He's been my manager for like 25. And he's from Oakland. He gets it. He understood I was in the service. So there were shows I did without even auditioning, it was because of the connections. When I did Laffapalooza with Jamie Foxx, they were like, oh, by the way, you're shooting Laffapalooza. I was like, oh, when do I have to submit? They're like, you don't, you're on the big show. You're doing the big show with Jamie. So Jamie always liked my comedy, so it wasn't a hard sell when they were like, oh, by the way, we're gonna get Dennis for this. So it was, I was blessed like that.
That's amazing.
Okay.
Do you have any influences, comedic influences, either whether it be Mexican or something? I was looking at some things, and there was and I hope I don't pronounce the name wrong. It's like Cantin Flav. Or like back in the day, he was like one of the very first Mexican comedians. They compared him to like the Charlie Chaplin of Mexican comedians back then.
My biggest influence, not style-wise, but someone who I always admired, and it's a lot of the young guys throw his name out, but I don't think they realize who he was, Richard Pryor. Because it's one thing to sit there and use profanity, sprinkle it in, but what Richard was doing back in the 60s, it was unheard of. You're coming off the free speech movement and the civil rights movement, and having a black man on stage telling America to kiss his rear. His comedic genius, there was guys that died for less, got lynched for less than what Richard did, and he was out there, he carried the torch, from Dick Gregory to Richard Pryor, and it opened doors for us. Paul Rodriguez will always talk about that. He doesn't refer to Cantinflas, that comedian you're talking about. Paul refers to like Richard Pryor, of course, Pico and the Man, Freddie Prinze.
Freddie Prinze. Yeah.
But our influence for second generation, third generation Latinos, it was Red Fox. Sanford and Son, Good Times, What's Happening. There was no Latino comparable. So as people of color, we identified with that in the 70s. That was our comedy,
Gotcha.
Welcome Back, Carter, because they had quite a few Latinos in Welcome Back, Carter. Because it was cultural. Because they were, I think that came out of Brooklyn.
Yeah,
because they had
that Puerto Rican.
There was another one too, Chico the Man. I think that's what your guy Freddie Prinze was in. Yeah.
Freddie Prinze, I love that show. And then sadly he overdosed, you know, and his son went on to be he was young, but his son went on to be a dramatic actor. But between Freddie, it went to Paul. And then for a long time, Paul was the only Latino comic you saw on stage. And then, he paved the way for George Lopez and Carlos Mencia, and then Gabriel Iglesias. I get to do the Fluffy tour with Gabriel. I've done,
What about Leguizamo? He was out for a while. Was he later, John Leguizamo?
Yeah, he was later. He was like 90s into the 2000s.
Because I remember him. I guess he's more around my, Okay.
Yeah, he's a genius. He's one of the few guys I haven't. Him and Eddie Griffin are two guys that I never worked with.
Oh, wow. You got to do it. You cross bars. Holler at, hey, I need to holler at Mr. Dennis.
Yeah. Big Dennis.
Dry bar comedy has been such a blessing because as minorities, we have to remember something. If our people love us, so I think Latino is right around 20% of the demographic. If you get half of them, that means 10% know who you are, and half of African-American community, it doesn't add up. But when white America starts, who are the majority, when they start getting to know who you are, that's a whole, my specials hit 150 million views now. And it's opened doors around the country for me where I'm brand new. After 28 years, I'm brand new to a half of America.
Back on top, bars.
You get like $5 per view because like nice little, yeah, like $5. Like, I ain't talking about like $5.
The Dry Bar, they're part of VidAngel, and they're the most transparent company I ever worked with. From Comedy Central to NBC to Stars, the TV for BET, all those credits were good and they opened doors for me. But when this internet, that's a whole nother game. I'm 58 years old. And
man, I didn't know that, man. You
don't look 58. You look great.
That's called shoe polish and good living.
I'm sitting there like, man, I'm looking like,
no way. That's awesome.
Now I'm like, oh shit, no.
I've had a crazy cool life, where I've marched the National Veterans Association. They had their big national parade. I think it was a VFW. One of the organizations had their big parade in Baltimore. And I was with Native Americans. I got to wear like bald eagle feathers. I got to wear a real headdress. And they're like, well, you're with the Native family and you're with us and you're a veteran, so we're gonna let you wear this. How many people could say they've actually marched with, and we were the only flight going down that street that people stood and clapped for? Because who's danced in a powwow that's not Native? I've been able to do that. Who is backstage at the Apollo and looks up and sees the pictures of all the greats, from Cad Calloway to Ella Fitzgerald, and I looked at it, I literally started shaking. I'm like, what am I doing here? But that's just God's blessings on my life to get a little taste of that, and I'm a blessed man.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to know, because I was going to say that at the end, but I want to know what comedian made the best movie? Because, there are a lot of comedians have some great movies, like
Eddie.
You think Eddie made the best movie? Like one. You got to name the movie, because when you say Eddie, I do, because Eddie has a lot. But
that's hard to pick one. Okay, so the original Coming to America, genius.
Got you. Boomerang.
Boomerang
was Nutty Professor.
Harlem Nights, the Nutty Professor. The Trading Places.
Trading Places.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think they should do a remake of that. But now the reason why I asked that question of you, right? Because I heard you talk about Jamie Foxx, and I had this question to some other people, and they like. The younger people, they said, Dave Chappelle. And I was like, what movie did he make? Because I couldn't understand. And they were like, well, he was in movies. And I was like, no, like he was the star. Like what movie? I was like, I don't have Bake. And I was like, that's not on the level of, Boomerang and, Trading Place. That's not on the same level. I said, so which one? And they were like, I don't know. And I came up with a person. They was like, I don't think so. And I said, I don't know one better. And I'll give it to Jamie Foxx with Ray.
Oh, you know, what I was in tears when he won the Oscar for that, because having knowing him, he did such a good job.
He was Ray.
On par with Denzel's Malcolm.
Malcolm, yes, that's absolutely great comparison.
But everything I love, when I was younger, whenever I found myself getting too soft, I would put in Malcolm X.
Yeah, okay.
And I would watch it again. They mismarketed that movie so bad. They made it like what we talked about earlier. They marketed it to a black audience. And it's like black folks already knew Malcolm.
Yeah.
They should have marketed it more of a generic so that people, because I had a perception of Malcolm X that totally changed in that movie. You know, and I grew up in Berkeley and they taught Malcolm X in school, but he wasn't this angry militant. He was a man that had, really fallen in love with God in his religion. And his trip to Mecca really changed his life, and it made the nation turn on him, so I've read a couple of things.
Yeah. But I want to know, like, of the movies, because I was really good, because I always said Eddie made the best movies. And
I was just thinking comedy. So yeah, you would have to say Jamie because of Ray. Yeah. Eddie, the whole breadth of experience, his if you put his resume against anybody as far as movies,
I put it right next to Denzel. I remember having, because I'm a movie like borderline connoisseur, like movies and sports. I'm kind of like Rain Man with it. But but when they said that, name was like Denzel, and I said, no, name your top 5 Denzel movies, and they named it. And I said, I named my top Eddie movie, and they was like, wow. And I said, yo, he real nice, because one, my children love this movie. It's not even in my top 10 for Eddie. They love Mr. Church, and I can't understand. Like, it was a good movie,
that's cool. Yeah.
But I was like, my kids, they really enjoyed it, and I was like, I don't understand how they galvanized towards that movie.
Here's how big an influence Eddie is. The vast majority of young Latino and Black comics, when we do a white voice, making fun of a white guy, we do Eddie.
Correct. Facts. I grew up on Eddie.
Yeah. So, and Eddie's version of him making fun of a white guy.
Yeah.
A generation of comics after that, that's their version of a white guy.
Absolutely. Because it's special when he was talking about Rocky. He's like, yeah, that could really happen. When he talking about the Jews. That was like that whole skit. And
when you work with guys at that, when you work with guys at that level, I remember working with Tommy Davidson, and Tommy did his old black man working at McDonald's, and a young guy comes in real casual, like, yeah, let me get number 1 and number 3, and he turns in to a slave. And he just goes into this character like he's gonna get us all in trouble. But but he instantly went from one character to another. He went, oh, that's why he's on In Living Color. Right. That's why all the sketch comedy and movies that he did. Damon Wayans.
Damon did it, because I remember Damon. I didn't remember Tommy Davidson doing it, but I remember him doing it on there. Because
I did a couple of weeks in a row with Damon, and he would do his. It was a trip because he was going through a divorce, and I just listened to him for 2 weeks. Him just in between shows, just talk to me like we were boys. Yeah. And at the end of the 2 weeks, I went to shake his hand and say thanks for working with you. He gave me a real hug. He's like, man, thanks for listening to me. And you get to meet guys on that level, and he laughed because I bought dinner one night after the show. I was like, yeah, I'll take the. And he just cracked up because he's like, nobody pays when they're with me.
Yeah.
I'm a grown man and I can buy a meal.
Thanks. So now, looking at, your relationships with these different entertainers and stars, you mentioned Damon Wayans. Damon Wayans, when he came out on the special, that was the big thing, showcasing on HBO. Right. And I remember some of those people. That was pretty awesome. So Damon Wayans had one. Robin Harris was there as well. Chris Rock, he was the one that I think he let it off, and he dropped the mic, and they told him, like, go back out there and pick that damn mic up. But that's his signature move. Like, after he finished, drop the mic. And it was like, you better not do a hit pick, go pick the mic up. And that was other comedians bringing other comedians out, because there weren't at that particular time there weren't Def Jam. It was no Comic View yet. That was an HBO special. That was everything. Only the biggest comedians would get those. So when Eddie did that, and one of your contemporaries, Paul Rodriguez, was on that show as well. So they showcased the next up and coming. Yeah. Meaning it was one, I want to say Barry Sobel was on there as well. I can't do no more.
I remember Barry Sobel.
I can't do no more. I can't do no. So now they're out there. So I'm asking you, are you doing this now? Is bringing other young upcoming Latino and Hispanic comedians out so we can be more notable of them? Okay.
I had a friend who unfortunately passed away. He had a rare form of cancer, but when he met me, his name was Cain Lopez. He said, "I heard you're like George." And I'm like, "What?" Because you don't like young Latino comics. And George fired me my first week at a comedy club when he found out I was Mexican.
Hold up, George Lopez fired you because he said, "Hold up." Okay, what is this about?
George hates his own people. It's a great act, but George got a lot of light years of therapy away from being sane. George, and he went off on me about it because I still went to the club. I was like, I get it. He don't want me to step on his material. George has a lot of self-hate, and if you're a Latino, you will not perform with him.
Okay. Wow. Because I went to a taping of his show some years ago. We went to tour California, and we went to the George Lopez show. Matter of fact, it's kind of weird. Dion Cole was his warm-up comedian. He's on Blackish, and he's coming out. So
Dion's a beast.
Yeah, definitely. So Dion Cole was the warm-up comedian, and I was like, okay. So now you're saying, I was like, yeah. So
he had one Puerto Rican comic on staff for writing, and a writing credit for a comedian for one of the late night shows. That's a huge boost to the career.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
None of the Mexican comics.
But what about his writer? He didn't have any writers. Like,
he had a Puerto Rican guy out in New York, and then every once in a while he had Johnny Sanchez, my friend, on the show, and he had Rudy Moreno on the show. I think those are the only two Latino comics that performed on Lopez Tonight. Okay. Yeah, he had a lot of issues. And you live on Pebble Beach or out in Carmel, you win. It doesn't matter what your upbringing was, you win. That's one of the most exclusive places on the planet. Yeah. And you live there with the richest of the rich, and you're still angry about your childhood. And it's ridiculous. But yeah, Gabriel Iglesias and Paul Rodriguez, those are my boys. They've always looked out for other comics. Whether it's Latino or Black or white, they just look out for comics, and I try to do that as much as possible with the young comics that I meet. I'll throw a Latino all-star show, and I have 3 or 4 of the young guys with me.
Hey, listen, whenever you're in Charlotte, let me know, and I'm going to see you live because I've seen so many shows and everything. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember. Me and my wife, before we had children, we used to go to the comedy club probably twice a month. On weekends, and in Nels in New York, we were just there every time, and I was like, oh, I seen him. And then Comic View, I'm like, that's why when I saw the name, I was like, all right. But then when I saw some of the show, I was like, you sound familiar, and I was like, yeah, you guys look younger than you were. I was like, when you said the comedian, because I heard the one you said the worst joke you ever created. It was like, yeah, because when I want to go, I wake up with a bowl of life, eat life cereal. And, and then when I go to bed, I eat life cereal because if I go, they're going to say he was full of life. And then he said, that was the worst joke I ever told.
It's a dad joke, it's a dad joke. And,
it's definitely a dad joke. I was like, that was good anyway, but even you making fun of yourself. Yeah, even you making fun of yourself. I was like, okay, that's really
I pride myself. Now, like, this was funny. I got to do the North Dakota State Fair. And
okay, what is that like?
Yeah. They got cowboys and Indians up there, and apparently I'm Indian.
Yeah, cowboys and everybody against us. Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's in an amphitheater right there in the middle of the fairgrounds, and
Okay.
it wasn't even an amphitheater. It was set up like an amphitheater. It was just bleachers that they put around a stage. And but 36 shows in 9 days, and they could have kids there. So I would tell comics, the young comics, man, work clean. You can add salt, you can't take it away. You know,
Right.
if you ever made any kind of food, you know, if you put too much salt, it's ruined.
It's over. Yeah.
You know, and if all you have is profanity, adult humor, well, you've narrowed yourself to a really small audience. Dry bar, shoot, all over the country, you know, from a church to a state fair to whatever.
Absolutely.
It's opened doors for me to be able to go anywhere, and you can have your grandma and your kids at my show. And that's something that the comics off the side, the ones that hate clean comedy, they go, man, I wish I could do that.
Yeah.
Use your brain.
But
you can do it.
But I think if you do clean comedy, you know, you're more versatile because you can
Oh, yeah.
always, you know, go towards your audience. And that's what I like, that what I've seen of you was that, you know, you were in a multicultural type audience and you kind of had these, you know, jokes. Then I saw something you had a little bit more edgy, and I said, oh, he sees his audience.
Like
He's
it,
oh,
right.
Gotta read your
And I
audience.
was like, oh, okay. Yeah, he already, you know, so I was like, oh, okay. I like this. That's why I told you. I said I had a whole bunch of questions, you know. And,
I remember doing an NAACP fundraiser in San Francisco at Punchline Comedy Club. And we get there and the audience was all white. It was all old, rich Jewish.
Okay, say it again. Hold up. You say you went to NAACP awards and everybody was all white and Jewish.
It was old, rich Jewish people who are the largest supporters of the NAACP. So they, you know, the media does a really good job destroying, you know, and trying to divide. People that were killed that weren't black during the civil rights movement were the Jewish brothers that would march. And they got they got treated just as if they were black. They got lynched, they got hung. So when I showed up at the club and I told the manager, I said, I thought this was the NAACP event. He said, it is. These are the biggest donors. They came to the fundraiser.
Absolutely.
But one of my comedy friends, he was like, yeah, you ain't gonna be able to do, and he said the N-word. He's black, so he got away with it. You ain't gonna be able to do your N-word stuff tonight. And I was like, what? He goes, yeah, audience. And I went, well, don't you look at the audience? I went up there and killed it. No, I didn't do stuff that I could have done on, you know, on BET, but that audience wasn't. Right. You can't shift gears, you know, because there's times to be an artist and do what you want. But when you're a paid entertainer, you gotta entertain that audience.
It's true. Absolutely.
So you gotta be able to shift gears.
Yeah. So now look, shifting gears.
Okay.
Something a little bit more controversial. It was in the news recently. How do you feel about Whoopi Goldberg having to retract and also being suspended for her controversial words about you know, Jewish people and
I get what she was trying to say. She sometimes, you know, if you misspeak by one word, if she had just said it wasn't just a race thing, but she said it wasn't about race. I get where it was. She identifies as that, you know, on one hand, you could see them go, hey, you know, cultural appropriation. You've used one of our names throughout your whole career, because her last name she's Karen Johnson. That's her real name.
Yeah. But she's Jewish. You know that, right?
Well, she doesn't. She says, I don't identify with the faith. I just call myself Jewish.
Yeah, because before she used to wear the emblem, and back in the day, Billy Crystal, and they had that. I want to say they were doing it's a campaign. It was a whole campaign. It was on HBO. It was pretty big. It was almost similar to like Feed the World, but it was comedy, and it was during the
it was a
like comic aid or
something. Comic relief. Comic relief.
No, comic relief was it comic? It was something huge like that.
Yeah.
And I remember that. And that's why I was like, I always knew. I was like, no, she's black and Jewish. So when I heard it, I was like, yo, y'all know she's Jewish. Like, I did know that wasn't her name. That was her stage name. But she said it. Now, remember, you can change faiths. You know, I'm not saying that you can't. You say, you know, I don't see myself because, you know, I'm main component. But when I listened, I was like, well, it's almost like you speaking about Latino. Maybe I couldn't say it because I'm not Latino, or me speaking about a Black issue. But it's like I can speak about two things that's me. So you can speak about being Latino and being a man. You know,
Yep.
she can speak about being a Black woman and, you know, Black and a woman. I can speak about being Black and a man. I can't speak about being Black or being a man and Latino. You can. I can't speak about being Black and a woman. Only Jay Tanae can. So she kind of checked both boxes, you know, from what I knew. And I was like, I thought she can. That's almost like, you know, NAACP saying we're going to suspend, you know, Big O because, you know, he was talking about a Black issue. And I'm like,
Yeah.
they didn't agree with. And I'm like,
Well, she's not Jewish, but there was no malice in what she's not Jewish, but
Okay.
she identifies as it. You know, she's all throughout. I mean, she's been doing the entertainment business for 50 years.
Hold on. You just said she's not Jewish, but she identifies it. I don't understand that. What do you mean?
Me either. So there's a fine line between cultural appropriation. I don't understand it either, bro. You know,
like,
she's gotten away with that.
Like she's not Christian, but she identifies as Christian. Like,
yeah. Well, she doesn't. She said it herself. I do not practice any faith. However, I've always identified as with the Jewish culture.
Gotcha.
She didn't have any malice in her heart. And there's a difference. People are comparing it to how Roseanne was canceled and Whoopi got a 2-week suspension. What Roseanne did was she was being vicious.
Correct.
Whoopi was trying to say it was bigger than race.
Correct.
You know, it was humanity. If you look at if you stop and go, the Holocaust had nothing to do with race, then you're ignorant. But she was saying it's not just about race, it was about, you know, the ugly side of humanity. That's what she was saying. She was speaking about the human condition.
But okay, let me say this, because I had a discussion with a person before. Matter of fact, it was a teacher some years ago, over 15 years ago. And
I can't hear you though.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I apologize. One of my former colleagues, and I explained to him, I said, well, you know, Jewish is a religion. And he told me, he said, no, it's not. And I said, yeah, it is. Like, you can go worship in a religion and become Jewish. And he, no, it's like a race. And I said, no, I can't change my race. I promise you, I can't. I can't go somewhere and say, nope, I'm Caucasian now. You know, like, unless I bleach or whatever, I had a different experience. And what I was trying to explain to him, I said, me, I'm Jewish. And I was being facetious with him. I said, no, I'm Jewish. And he was like, you Jewish? And I said, that's my point. You can't look at me and tell your religion. You can't look at a person unless they have some type of markings or something, or if they say something, but just looking at them, you can't tell a person's religion. I said, just like you can't, know a person's Jewish unless they tell you,
They stereotypically, a lot of Jewish men will have the curly hair. It's called the Jew. My nephew is half Jewish, and he has a Jewfro. He has very thick curly hair. I wish I had it. I got this straight stringy hair.
Absolutely.
Back during the Holocaust, they would measure heads, measure noses.
Correct.
And if you had certain size head and a certain size nose, you were Jewish, and they would kill you.
But part of that was if you had African features.
Yeah.
Also. So it wasn't you were Jewish. It was like how much African features do you have? That was about. And
if they had DNA testing back then, they'd have killed themselves. We all got African roots.
We all got that. Absolutely. But but I was saying, like, I'm Jewish. Yeah. And he was like, and I said, that's the point. It's a religion. I can become Jewish. I can go to the synagogue. I can.
Sammy was Jewish.
Yeah. So Sammy Davis was Jewish. Absolutely. He had the Star of David, everything. Yeah. So for me, when I was explaining that to my colleague, and I was like, he was like, no, it's ethnicity. And I was like, so you just saying that they can't become another religion? Because I know me, I can't become another Black. Like, so that was my issue during that time period. But then I've since, now I say, you could call whatever you want, because now people identify with stuff and say, this is who I am, and that's why I like, what is it, ATL? where they had a little skit where the young man said, I identify as being a middle-aged white man, you know, and he saw some black kids in the neighborhood, like, please arrest them, you know, and it was like, he, you know, but it was a black guy saying that's what he identified as. And I said, yeah, I'm not trying to tell people what they are, what they ain't. So we're in that stage. So that's why I was like, it's getting weird now where the rules are actually becoming rewritten and redrawn. And I was like, I used to stand here and this is where this was. And now I can't find my keys because now everything is a little bit misplaced. And I don't want to say something that's so offensive. And I was like, you know, like, I'm not being offensive. I'm thinking I'm being honest, and having honest conversations sometimes are difficult. And that's why I think so many people were identifying with Dave Chappelle and some of his comedic genius, where it's like, no, have some empathy, you know, on that.
Dave and Chappelle and Rock are the two comics that can say things that not even other black comics can say. And they say things on a level of brilliance and genius, comedic genius. Chappelle, I mean, Chris Rock, when he did his special in DC,
Claire,
the Civil War.
No. Oh, I forget the name of that one. Because I thought that was the best one ever. I thought Chris
Civil
Rock,
War in the black community.
Yeah, absolutely. He was like, he said, Civil War is going on. He said, there's black people and there's niggas. And there's a civil war and people don't know. And I was like, everybody that's black was like, he said, what? Black people will open up a club and niggas are shut it down. And I was like,
grand opening, grand closing.
Absolutely. And I was like, man, that's pretty awesome.
My son's mother, she grew up in an all white neighborhood. And I used to tease her that she was the whitest woman I ever met. And I remember watching that special with her, and she was just screaming. I mean, she grew up in an affluent neighborhood. She grew up in a gated community, and her mother were the black part of that community. And I used to tell them, I would talk to my son, like, why do you talk to him about race? I said, because you're not a threat to these white folks. When he gets bigger, he's a threat to them.
Facts.
And they were like, why do you got to make everything about race? And sure enough, years later in that same area, you know, he got beat up at a park because they're like, you're not welcome around here.
Absolutely. And
so
if he starts dating, he becomes a larger threat when he starts dating, because you date in your community. So that becomes a whole nother conversation, and it gets much deeper.
Yeah.
You know, much deeper. The cool part is that you are letting me know you're multicultural, so you know what, you're going to judge them on their morals and their character. So that's awesome. Now I have some questions because I know we're running late, and we can like, I promise you, I could be here another hour because it's a great conversation.
I could do this all day, but I've got 30 minutes to shower, shine, and get to a service.
So I'm gonna ask these questions. You could say one or the other. I'm gonna give you two people, and I want you to choose one or the other, or you could say both.
Okay.
All right. So first one, I have Eddie Murphy, James Chappelle.
Eddie.
Okay. Paul Rodriguez or George Lopez? Gotta know that one already.
Paul. Yeah.
Burritos or tacos?
Tacos.
Tacos. Okay.
Yeah. Tacos are more versatile.
Oh no, we can't quantify. We can't quantify.
I love taco.
Okay. Handball or soccer?
Handball. You got to run too much of soccer.
Okay. Tito Puente or Julio Iglesias?
Tito.
Okay.
Tito.
Acapulco or Cancun?
I've been to neither, so I think Cancun.
Mexico. It's like both in Mexico. Saturday Night Live or In Living Color?
Ooh. In Living Color, but if you said old Saturday Night Live, the Eddie Saturday Night Live, that was
right. Not SNL, just Saturday Night Live.
Okay, or Showtime or HBO?
I don't have Showtime anymore because you got to get an app. So I got HBO.
All right. So we just ran it down. Yeah. So some was more difficult than others, but I try to listen to the conversation and I come up with some things, like, all right, and try to throw you off because some of them be like, you want to, we had to put that other one in there, like both.
I mean, comedically, Chappelle is on the Mount Rushmore stand-up comedy.
Whoa, who's on your Mount Rushmore? Who's on your Mount Rushmore? You only get 4. Yeah, who's on your Mount Rushmore?
I
give you Richard.
Richard Pryor, Chappelle, George Carlin.
Oh,
And then the fourth one I'll leave blank for everyone else that I love.
Politically
he
correct.
took the right out.
I mean,
He
you
took
look
it out.
at-
He took it out.
Yeah, I mean, Gabriel Iglesias does arenas. I mean, Kevin Hart does a sold out a football field. I mean, it's a stadium.
Yes.
You know, so there's different things to add up. But as far as pure stand-up comedy, you know, the three I named, those are geniuses.
And yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's why I
Absolutely.
don't I don't have Chappelle on mine because he has one genre. So I had Carlin and I have Richard Pryor. I have Eddie. So I had those, but my fourth one is Dick Gregory because of his
Dick Gregory.
You know, Dick Gregory is on my Mount Rushmore.
Why don't y'all put no females in there? We can't get one female to be representative. Not one.
That is true. That is
okay, but here now I'll be as objective as possible. Name a female comic funnier than those four. Pure comedy, not just of gender. Pure comedy.
Pure comedy.
Who would I over mine? That's why they're on the Mount Rushmore. So I wouldn't, but that could be.
But do you have to be
level?
as funny? You can't just get like a little. Because females always get the other side. They always get like the second hand when it comes to comedy. They're always like, you're a good comedian, but you're a female comedian. So
no, that's not so funny. Is funny. Funny is funny, but the trap and the challenge for a female comic is if you're too pretty, the women don't like you because now their husband's staring at you for an hour. And then you have the male basher, which makes the guy uncomfortable, or this new genre of young female comics that think, you know what, I'm going to talk about my coochie. And it's kind of like, you know, just, I mean, Whoopi was hilarious back in the day before she became too political. But her straight up stand-up comedy, Moms Mabley was a genius. So probably of all the female comics, stand-up wise, it'd be Moms Mabley. Lunel.
I like Samora. I'm more of a Samora guy.
Samora, I met her. I worked with her before. It was a lot of shock value. Just straight up pure comedy genius. You know, comedic genius. I wouldn't list her as a genius, a comedic genius. Cheryl Underwood is a beast.
Oh yeah.
Cheryl
she's
could
on the
talk
radio.
about
Absolutely.
Yeah. From dirty jokes.
Give me a couple. I just need the female just to be added a little bit. I'm just
now. If you look at the whole
one in there,
the breadth of experience that made people laugh with movies and her sketch and everything, Carol Burnett.
Monique got to be in
I used to watch her when I was a kid. Like I really did.
So I say Monique
because
her movies and stand up. But for me, like a person that had everything, because he was just and he had a show, and he gets overlooked a lot, was Robin Williams.
Oh man, Robin, he's not even looked at as a stand-up anymore.
Yeah,
you know,
he was a movie star. He was just a monster. George Carlin, it was because he was so honest. He was brutally honest, and I think like right under his brutally honest is Chappelle in that genre. As far as movies, the total package, I give it to Richard Pryor and Eddie because they did it at the highest level. Box office. Even though Richard Pryor had his own, what is it called? Sketch show, like during the late 70s, early 80s, he had his own sketch show, you know, and, you know, Eddie was on Saturday Night Live, but he went to movies versus creating it. He could have had his own show in the early 80s. We thought he was Saturday Night Live. I'm just being honest. Billy Crystal,
I remember asking Damon, I asked Damon Wayans what he thought of comics that went into movies and never went back to stand-up. They weren't stand-up comics. They were great entertainers. So Damon looked at Eddie because when you get stand-up in your blood, you're going to do it until you die.
Yeah, he did. He went to movies that came back Raw, for instance.
Yeah, but then he did.
And then he went back and never came back. He's done nothing else since then.
No, he came back one time. Remember, he just did a special like maybe 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't special.
So if it wasn't,
it wasn't like the first Delirious and Raw. Yes, but remember, he left you know, he left and he did some movie. He did
Right.
a slew of movies.
Well,
Then he
I'm just saying
came
what
back and did
Damon
more.
said. You know, Damon was
Okay,
going
right.
through a divorce because his wife was like, "Why don't you stop? We've got everything, all the money we could use. We got the house." And he's like, "How do you think I
But he
paid for
couldn't
this?"
stop. Gotcha.
And you know, you get the sitcoms, the movies, the specials, and he was like, "I will do this till I die. This is it's in my blood," and I tend to agree with that. You know, I'm a minister, but comedy is what I do.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Right.
not who I am.
Right.
It's what I do.
Yeah, but
So
now
it's
watch
saying
this.
that we gotta wrap it up. It's
Okay.
saying that a couple more things because you gotta go. He said he had to leave out. I just want to know, moving forward, do you have anything? Are you interested in movies? Do you have anything we should be looking for coming out, or before we get out of here?
I wrote a movie called American Mijo, and it's we're just waiting on the
Whoa.
funding.
You
Not
making
like
fun of
American.
American Me?
No, it has a one parody scene
American
as the
Son.
tip of the cap, but it is basically it's the Latino Fridays. It's a rich kid gets sent to the hood to learn where his dad grew up, and we're waiting for the final funding to come through. And I mean, from Sheila E. to Angela Johnson to Paul Rodriguez, Johnny Sanchez, they've all said yes when they read the script. So and I just love God's hand over my career, because if it had been funded 3 years ago, it would have been released during the pandemic, which meant it would have went to Redbox.
Gotcha.
Wow.
The
Gotcha.
funding's going to come through in time for it to get released, because my vision was always the theaters. So that right there, hopefully if we shoot it this year, by the end of this year, it'll be out summer of 23. And that movie right there is going to be, I think I've seen other Latino comedies, and this to me will be up there. Everybody who's read it loves it. So we're looking forward to that.
Awesome.
American
Right.
Mijo.
American
Yeah.
Mijo.
American Mijo, go see it. You know, because Big Dennis going to have Big O, like, you know, sweeping up in the background like this. Get my camera. I just, you got to speak into existence. We got to speak into existence.
So I used to write for Mike, and Mike actually was like, write the Latino comedy, and I just want to be the brother in it, because Mike has a huge Latino following from the Fridays movies.
Right.
He didn't say brother. He said, you know, he said something else. But I was like, Mike.
Mike is a cool dude. He came to our facility some years ago. He goes to the kids' youth houses and things of that nature. So
nice.
He was, you know, pretty awesome. And the kids was, you know, he was cracking on staff and everything. It was, you know, it was a pleasure. You know what I'm
awesome.
saying? So
well, I really appreciate you guys.
Yes,
Absolutely.
appreciate
Awesome.
you. Thank you for dropping by KROSS BARZ. Check us out next time on KROSS BARZ, KROSS BARZ. Check out Mr. Dennis Gaxiola. I'm sure you're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that.
Comedian
All right, have a
Dennis,
good
and
one.
2 specials on Amazon Prime. So you check them out.
Absolutely.
All right, we got it.
God bless. Bye-bye.